So this was what we saw last class. Stop me when you feel that I have I haven't covered earlier.
Okay.
Okay. So we would have seen this. I remember showing you Navier and Stokes portraits, photos, and probably statue. Maybe a statue and Stokes photo. You have gone through this. I remember, correct? Elliptic grids. Remember?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
We're looking at Poisson grids. There we talk about the adaptive grids also, no grids which change
Yes,
with
sir.
time. Yeah. When you're computing, you go through, say iterations. So you not necessarily that you should use it only for unsteady flow. Okay, I'll tell you how to make use of adaptive grid for steady flows. Here, the flow is moving. When the flow is moving, according to time, you get the solution and you adapt the grid. Sometimes you do steady state calculations in the meaning that you're interested only in the final steady state. You are not interested in how the flow is evolving. Okay? In such calculations, still you go through iterations starting from initial assumption. So when the initial assumption is changing its values, in that intermediate solution, you look for changes in pressure or changes in density or whatever variable you want to adapt it to. Now you adapt it according to changes in that as and when you go along. So you can use adaptive grids also for steady state computations. Okay. Did we go to unstructured meshes?
Yes, sir.
And we saw pressure contours on HSCT aeroplane,
Yes.
wind turbine airfoils. This one I remember, right? CFC study
Yes.
and
Yes.
externally stored. So this is just your upper and lower CP values, okay, on one section of the wing. Have you seen this?
Yes, sir. We also saw this.
So we have finished this actually.
Yes,
So
sir.
we'll
We
go to the
finished.
next one. We'll go to the next lecture. Okay, now what are you doing? We are still in the basic definition terminology stage. So we'll learn some more definitions, some more terminologies. Actually, this will this learning new terminologies will continue throughout the course, but you learn some very basic terminologies in this module. First is the continuum hypothesis. What we are going to do in this course is to solve Navier-Stokes equation, but you can use CFD also to solve other forms of equations. For example, neglect viscosity, you can solve Euler equations. Neglect rotationality, you can use panel methods. All these can be done. These are also CFD. Then the next step that when the fluid is not a continuum, you have rarefied gas dynamics and the use of Boltzmann equation. Okay, so these Maxwell-Boltzmann equations, a statistical study. On a higher level, you can call this also FCA. Although we are not going to cover that aspect of CFD in this, but we should know that when we mean CFD for this course, we are meaning the continuum domain. We are not going into the rarefied domain. And you can solve heat conduction equation, and something called advection equation. Many equations are there for which you can use the same CFD concepts. In other words, anything which moves like a fluid and where heat is also involved, You can even treat heat like the heat conduction problems also you can solve like CFD equations. Wave propagation equations can be solved like CFD equations. So all these things we will assume this continuum hypothesis. So we are not addressing in this course when this continuum hypothesis breaks down. It can and it will when you go to higher altitudes. Okay, the rarefied atmosphere, it will somehow the fluid cannot be treated as continuum. We'll see the cases now. Okay. So the basic equations are conservation of mass, momentum, and energy. So we assume that the fluid is a continuous medium. Properties such as pressure and temperature derive their meaning from this hypothesis. This is very important statement because if they derive their meaning from the molecular mean free path assumption, okay, then that's a different route to measure temperature and pressure. If you put a thermometer in a space where there is in upper space, for example, it will show 0 Kelvin. But if you use the molecular dynamics to calculate the temperature using the kinetic theory of gases definition of temperature, you will get some temperature there. Because thermometer will work only if there is a continuum. Okay, so you should be aware of such pitfalls. Now let's say lambda is the mean free path of the molecules in the medium. In ground level, this lambda is very, very small. That is, molecules are very closely packed together, so density is more. And then these molecules, on an average in a unit volume, on an average, what is the distance between the collision between two molecules? The average distance between collision of two molecules. Obviously, if you have more people in the room, will collide with each other more frequently. If you have less people in the same room, the chances that you are colliding with another person is, suppose all of you are running randomly, then the chances that you collide with each other are less. So similarly, if the gas is rarefied, there are less molecules per unit volume, which means that the mean free path lambda is large in that case. There are more people in that room, which means denser molecules, no more number of molecules per volume. Then the distance between successive collisions, which is called mean free path, is less at a lower altitude. So suppose along with, we say L is the length scale of the flow. We know the length scale. For typical wing problems, we take it as the mean aerodynamic chord or chord of the wing. For 2D, we can say the chord of the aerofoil section. So L is some length scale of the problem. Then you want to study, what happens inside a shock layer. So there, the shock thickness is the length scale of the flow phenomenon. So now for this, we define a number called Knudsen number. This is a non-dimensional number. It has no dimensions because it's length by length. In the numerator, you have mean free path, which is just a distance, length between two successive collision of molecules. On the denominator, you have the length scale of the phenomenon. So, continuum hypothesis holds good if k is much less than 1. So, imagine ground level, the length scale of the mean free path. The mean free path will be of the order of nanometers or micrometers. Micrometers is too high. Okay? Of the order of 10 power minus 10 meters angstrom or something like that. I forgot of angstrom. Whereas your typical wing will be the order of 1 meter, 1.5 meter, half meter. So obviously the K is around 10 power minus 11 in this case, which is it's very less than 1. Okay. When do you say it is when this Knudsen number is up to 0.15, up to that 11 you can, up to 0.1 actually. 0.01, you can use the continuum hypothesis without any problem. Then the Knudsen number is up to 0.01. From 0.01 to say 0.1 or 0.15, you have to use some, Navier-Stokes equations are still valid, but you may not use the slip conditions which you were using earlier. No slip condition. The no slip boundary condition may not hold good for Navier-Stokes equation between 0.01 and 0.5 value of Knudsen number. And beyond that, it's better to use your Maxwell-Boltzmann equations. Okay. Now you have some advancements in what if you calculate the entire flow field using kinetic theory of gases, even for the low velocity, low height. Low altitude means high density cases. And you'll have millions of particles, and collision to calculate collision will be between them will take enormous amounts of compute time. Okay. But finally, when you get the result, that will be very accurate. You don't even need a turbulence model if you do that. So that's known as DNS, direct numerical simulation. People have done that for simple cases for a small volume, mainly because of computational power limitation. Nowadays, with more and more computational power being available, people are going to the DNS approach, the direct numerical simulation approach. They're using this molecular kinetics for calculation of everyday problem. And the main advantage is you don't need any a turbulence model there, because the molecular collision itself will take care of everything. That itself is a statistical method. But it will take enormous computational resources if you want to do it for every molecule. So statistical method of Boltzmann and Maxwell-Boltzmann will tell you how to simplify that calculation. Even for rarefied gas dynamics, you don't do it for every molecule, but how to selectively choose those parameters and work your calculations. So now for rarefied or molecular gas dynamics, continuum hypothesis does not hold good. So Navier-Stokes equations do not hold good there, because they are based on the assumption of continuum. When that assumption itself breaks down, okay, you cannot have this continuum. The whatever equations are based on the continuum assumption. One interesting thing here is, I was telling you about the flow through a shock layer. What happens inside the shock? There are studies there. The shock thickness is a few angstroms, maximum, few microns. The length scale of this problem is the shock thickness. It happens that the Knudsen number lambda by L is large, okay, for this problem, because L is very small, comparable to lambda. Hence, for this problem, you cannot use Navier-Stokes equation. People resort to the same Maxwell-Boltzmann equation to solve this problem also. So what matters is the length, the ratio of the length. that is mean free path by characteristic length of the problem. Clear? Any doubts? Okay. There are no doubts. I'll go to the next slide. You all know this, just a revision. The Lagrangian Eulerian formulations. Now, due to the continuum hypothesis, we can talk of a point in space and a small infinitesimal volume of element of fluid around this point. Now, together, this fluid surrounding that point and the point itself included, we call it as a particle of fluid, you should say. In fact, this particle is adjacent to another particle and in all directions. So it's a continuum. The flow is described as specification of the physical properties of each particle in the flow. It's not atom, okay, it's not atom or molecules, but a collection of atom or molecules which are so close together, we call that group as a particle. Okay. Now this particle, if a fluid is assumed to consist of many sets, say millions of such particles, then you describe the specification of each particle in the flow. This particle has so much velocity. This particle has so much pressure. This particle has so much density. Next particle that has so much pressure, density, velocity. If you specify like that, it is called as a Lagrangian specification. Okay. On the other hand, if the flow is described as specification of the time history of the flow properties at every fixed point on the domain of interest, that is, we have a volume. Now this volume is fixed in space. Fluid is entering the volume and leaving the volume. Now for every small element of this volume, it can have different particles at different times. But then on that space, how does velocity vary? How does pressure vary? How does temperature vary? How does density vary? When talking about that kind of formulation is known as Eulerian formulation. So any doubts between Lagrangian and Eulerian formulations? You can formulate any way you want. Finally, you end up with equations which mean the same thing. Okay. Now this is the control volume, which is the left-hand side is called. What is happening there? The volume is fixed in space, the Eulerian formulation. Inside that you have a small dV, which is also fixed in space. Now fluid is entering the volume through some direction and leaving out through the opposite direction. Now this volume is enclosed by a surface. That surface can be divided into very small surfaces, each surface of area ds. And each of the velocity may not be in that direction of normal, it may be in some other direction. Okay. So each of this small volume has surfaces. The whole volume has a big surface on that. Usually, bother about the surface of the outer volume. Nothing which tells that you should not consider the small volume also. You can consider either the large volume or the smaller volume inside the volume. Everywhere, whatever you do, it will be called control volume of it. Not control volume can be anything. Now this control volume is a volume which is fixed. It doesn't change with time. But the particles moving in and out of the control volume may have different properties at different points in time. Now we are fixing our attention only on a point inside the control volume. Then see how flow properties vary inside the space. This is the Eulerian approach. Now if you write the equations in this form based on this assumption, it's called as conservation form of equation, which is very useful for CFT. Okay. There are other instances where the other formulation is very useful. Here this V is drawn around the same set of particles. So if the particles move around, they flow with that. This same particle will be somewhere else in the flow field. But what happens inside the particles? Do the pressure and density and temperature of the particles or velocity change with time? If you bother about that formulation, that means a Lagrangian we have seen. In this approach, we call the resulting equations as non-conservation form. Okay. One can be converted to other. It's not a big thing. You would have done it earlier in your course. Have you done it, Anantakrishnan, earlier? Ranish? Fluid dynamics course.
Yes, sir, we have done it.
Okay, good. And of course, we have the divergence theorem, which relates volume integral to surface integrals. Usually, when you do the formulation, what happens is, for example, especially the momentum equation or continuity equation, you need to convert. You want to have left hand side something will be surface integral, right hand side something will be volume integral, or vice versa. Now, to make them look similar, you have to convert the surface integrals to volume integrals so that you can put everything under one integral sign. If you can do that, you can do some tricks and get some differential equation or integral equation. To do this, we need a formula to convert one from the other. We now go to one of these formulations, d volume. Left hand side you see triple integral of some quantity d volume. Right hand side is double integral of v dot ds into rho. So look at the right hand side first. Compare with the left hand side figure here. Ts is the surface covering this volume. Okay. Now you are evaluating the integral only on the outer surface of this volume. But relating it to some other integral which is considering dv at every point, every small volume inside the volume is considered a particle. Okay, at every particle around that imaginary point has some property. When you integrate that, you have to do triple integral. Now, something which is connecting that triple integral to this double integral is given by this divergence theorem. So, it says that the triple integral of del dot rho v. Now, what does this mean? dv. dv, they put d volume because I didn't want to confuse v with velocity here. I put d volume. For every small volume in that space, okay, for every small volume, at that volume you have density and velocity inside that volume. So that is rho v here. Rho is density, velocity inside that volume. Now it doesn't stop there. It says it doesn't want rho v. It says del dot rho v. Now v is a velocity here, it's a vector. Rho is a scalar. What is del dot rho v without a scalar or vector?
Scalar, sir.
Scalar. Right. Because del is like a vector operator. It appears I dou by dou x plus j dou by dou y plus k dou by dou z. At this point, I want to ask Sanjeev whether he is following. Sanjeev?
Yes, sir, I'm following.
Okay. Abhishek? Abhishek? Abhishek?
Yes, sir, continue.
Okay. Shyamla?
Sir,
Are you following? Are you able to
yes, sir.
appreciate that?
Yes,
What is
sir.
that volume integral and meaning of left hand side? On the right hand side, you have rho v dot ds. So there you are evaluating rho v at the center of every small area here. Okay. Ashwin, following?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now these are related by this integral. It's a double integral because it's done over the outer area ds. For area you use double integral, correct? For volume you use triple integral. Now whatever coordinate systems you use, or whatever what I mean is Cartesian coordinate system or cylindrical coordinate system or spherical coordinate system, your d volume may change based on the ds may be changing, but this equation will hold good for any kind of system. Very basic. Okay. Even if you have curvilinear coordinate system, whatever it may be, this has to hold good. So left hand side is known as divergence without the integral. Del dot rho v, okay, for a elemental volume. What is this? What is this? Mass flow, right? Mass flow rate, correct?
Yes, sir.
So
Rho
mass
V.
flow, yeah, mass flow rate divided by that dV, which is small volume. At a particular point means its particle here is nothing but del divergence. Del dot rho v is called divergence. So that gives a physical meaning to divergence in fluid mechanics. Okay. You might have read this in physics courses earlier. Have you? In physics courses?
Sir, maths.
Maths. Okay. Oh, good. You have to remember all this stuff. Now the next one is substantial. Okay, this course will have some very mathematically intensive part, but something which you need to do the software. So it's a blend of mathematics, software, and some understanding also, some physical understanding. So some people excel in some of these. There are a few people who will excel in all of these. Let's see who excels in what this semester. Another definition is substantial derivative. It is used mostly in non-conservation form. Capital D by dt is known as substantial derivative. It is used to express your change per particle, which is dou by dou t plus v dot del. Now, what is the difference between del dot v and v dot del? Abhishek. Or Renish. Aishwarya.
Yes, sir.
What is the difference between v dot del and del dot v? You write down.
Sir, del
How
dot
they
is divergence.
del dot v is divergence. Yes. V dot del is
V dot del. It's just the multiplication into the divergence term, sir.
so how do they do? Expand both things? I dou by dou x is plus j dou by dou y. It's a 2D will be as we are happy. Huh? Dot, that is, this is what is the del? Del dot V is IU
by
plus
dot.
JV. So you get dou U by dou X plus dou V by dou YS del dot V. V dot
Yes.
del, what you are getting?
Mm. V dot L del will be V dot dou by dou X, dou by dou Y, and dou by dou Z.
No. So what dot is it? No, I dou by dou X plus J dou by dou Y plus K dou by dou Z. That is del.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And V will be IU plus JV plus KW.
Okay, so now the IJ and the terms will go away.
When you no. So how it will look like? How is it different from dou E by dou X plus dou E by dou Y plus dou V by dou Y plus dou W by dou Z? How is it different?
Just a second, sir. I'll complete it.
All of you can work out. I may ask anybody.
Sir, it will be U into del, I mean dou by dou X of some function plus V into.
Who's talking?
Sir, Sanjeev, sir.
Sanjeev, yeah.
So D dot
You.
del will be U into dou by dou X of some function plus
Yes.
V into dou by dou Y of some function plus W into dou
Dou
by
by
dou
dou.
Z of some.
Absolutely. So you take the function outside. It reads U dou by dou X plus V dou by dou Y plus W dou by dou Z. Am I right, Sanjeev?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So it's an operator. Just like dou by dou T is operating on something, V dot del is short form of that long equation. Say U dou by dou X of that function plus V, U dou by dou X plus V dou by dou Y plus W dou by dou Z is known as V dot del. It's a short form for that. Suppose that is acting on U, then all this inside that dou by dou X, you should have U. If it is V, it should have V. Okay? Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now
Yes,
d
sir.
by dt. Okay, good. Thanks. So this non-conservation form is the total derivative d by dt. It's called substantial derivative or total derivative. Is a local derivative dou by dou t. Sorry, temporal derivative dou by dou t plus local derivative v dot del. So when you add these two, you'll get the definition of dy. Okay, we'll come back to this when we at a later stage. Now let's go to some very basic aspect, modeling. Now we are talking about modeling the system or process. So you should model the physical aspects of the system. It's called physical model, where you have the physics coming into picture. So using physical laws, Newton's laws of motion or your fluid dynamic motion, you model the system. Then you use the mathematical model. Physically, you may have the concept that mass is conserved, right? Now you say that mass entering the volume is equal to mass going out of the volume if there is no accumulation of mass inside the volume. These are physical statements. How do you make them, convert them into mathematical equations? Well, now you have a mathematical model of the physical statement. Okay. So in the physical model, there may be approximations. The mathematical model will have these approximations inherently. In the mathematical model also there may be approximation which is in addition to the physical model's approximation. Okay. So in mathematical model, you have conservative model as mass, momentum, energy. These are the basic equations called conservative model. And you may have a constitutive model also. constitutive model is in order to supplant some of these things. This may not, completely determine this thing. You may have to, Newton's law of viscosity. It is not your, that is one thing. Something which is not obeying that Newton's law linearly. It's a non-Newtonian fluid. Then what do you have use for the viscosity term there? Then how about, the Sutherland's constant? How does viscosity vary with temperature? Hooke's law, stress and strain, how they relate to each other. Ideal gas law, P is equal to rho RT. Okay. Then some turbulence model, relations between, some turbulence and these. All these will form a constitutive model. But these are mathematical models of physical principles. So the mathematical model defines the system and process. It defines the interaction between the system and its environment. That is when you'll have boundary conditions. Sometimes you can go up to infinity. Sometimes you have to state that this is where I stop. So where you stop, you should put some condition. All the variables cannot have empty values in a computer system or even mathematical model. You should have the proper closure. The mathematical model it derives the interaction between the system and its environment, means the output of the mathematical model can give the interaction between system and its environment. Can, because it differs from problem to problem. Then mathematical model is capable of capturing the essential physics. This is the most important point, because whatever approximations is made in physical model, the mathematical model should be able to essentially capture the physics. So, if you want to solve the mathematical model equations, what you call it, so far we are talking about formulating equations. There are again two methods. One is analytical method. So these are exact solution to the mathematical problem. So you do only with the physical approximation. The approximation you make to the physical model. Yes. So this is known as analytical method. We call the result of analytical method as exact solution. Although we understand that the approximations of physics is inherent in that analytical method. Whereas in the numerical methods, they are approximate solution to the mathematical model. So now we have two layers of approximation. One is approximation level and approximations made in the physical model, which is inherent in this mathematical model, plus the approximation by which that mathematical model is solved. Okay. So we'll stop here today. This is slide number 8. Someone remember, we'll start from this next class.